On November 2nd, 2015, I got into a car and began driving 12,000 miles across America alone. I had a burning question. How is technology affecting America? And I had to find the answer. I met with 100 experts, not in areas of technology or sociology. They were experts in life as it was in the middle of the 20th century. This is the greatest generation. Born between 1915 and 1945, they're our oldest living citizens. They lived a lifetime before technology began affecting our relationships and society, and it is they that I knew held the answer. Let me rewind a little bit. I'm an anthropologist and a serial entrepreneur. Anthropology of the study of people, both past and present. I chose to get my degree in anthropology because a major tenet of the field is that there's no one way of doing things, and that fascinated me. And entrepreneurs, well, we start things. My first entrepreneurial pursuit was a tech company, and it was during that business growth that I started to notice something. I was spending an awful lot of time in front of the screen. The silence of digital communication has started to train me to think of it as normal, maybe even optimal, to simply send a digital message rather than pick up the phone and hear someone's voice or see them in person. As a result, I was seeing my friends and family less and less, and my anxiety and depression were growing. At the same time, myriad articles and newscasts were pouring out across the web, all asking the same question: how is technology affecting us? How does it change brain chemistry, child development, and education? I was relieved to find I wasn't the only one uncomfortable, but the anthropologist in me noticed something. Most of the people writing these articles were below the age of 50. They grew up with post-war technologies like plastics, microwaves, and space travel. Now, don't get me wrong, I too am below the age of 50. But I started to think that the people who would have the best narrative on how technology has changed everything are the people who grew up before electricity, running water, and motor vehicles were the norm. People who rode horses to school, procured at wild bronco roundups in the West, who remember seeing their first television, and who still remember the weight of appliances made entirely of steel. As an anthropologist, my instinct was to do ethnography, to talk to people in order to understand the problem that I perceived. That technology is affecting our lives on a deeper level than ever before, changing our relationships, our communities, even our societal norms. But first I had to understand the problem that I perceived, and so my research began. What I found is that technologies like smartphones and social media are designed to be addictive. Social media companies even employ people called attention engineers who use Las Vegas casino-style tactics in order to get and keep your attention. These tactics are so effective that 1 in 10 people are even checking their phones during sex. Not only this, we're starting to think of our online profiles as extensions of ourselves. An entire subset of anthropology has been developed to study just this. It's called the anthropology of cyborgs. Consider this the next time you're in line at the DMV or Secretary of State office. You're stuck, unable to accomplish anything except for that which the line is formed, and you're probably bored. Anthropologists are finding that the instinct is to pull out your technology and socialize online, giving your mind an out while your body is physically stuck in line. Herein lies my concern. We are being trained to think of our technology for socializing first, rather than the person standing right next to you in line. What we know about in-person communication is this. When we interact with each other in person, our bodies release pleasure hormones like dopamine and oxytocin, also known as the bonding hormone. Our bodies even have the ability to heal the ends of our DNA, known as the telomerase, literally extending our lives. We choose to socialize online because it seems easier, but when we do, we miss out on these physical benefits, and we choose to do so multiple times a day. Could this be why anxiety, depression, and suicide are on the rise? With 25% of young people experiencing these conditions compared to 18% in older generations. The anthropologist in me wasn't satisfied with research of others, and luckily, the entrepreneur in me took over. I wanted to hear from the people who had lived through this tech evolution, or perhaps revolution, in order to understand not just our history, but how technology has changed everything from communication to medicine, food, even intergenerational relationships. It was time for me to begin my own applied research. Like many social pioneers, I started by testing my theory on the people who would forgive me for anything. My own family. What I learned in those initial interviews with those elders was priceless. Our elders are concerned with how technology is affecting society, but they're equally as in awe as we are with the advances we've made, some of which have saved their lives. I knew I'd found the right work. I formulated 15 interview questions in order to conduct my research. Questions like, what occupations have you held? What's changed since your childhood? And how do you think technology is affecting today's youth? At this time, I also had to come to terms with an ulterior motive. I was about to get to know 100 elders on a deeper level than I had my own grandparents. Both my grandfathers had died before I was born, and both my grandmothers had passed away in the same month when I was a teenager. I was on a journey to learn how technology has changed everything, and on a journey to reclaim some of the history I'd lost out on in my own family. As I continued to interview, I started to understand the collective voice of the greatest generation, while also hearing intimate stories that marked their individual lives. I knew I wanted an American narrative in order to understand how technology has changed us. And that would mean travel in order to interview people of diverse backgrounds. And that would take travel funds that I did not have. I decided to do a Kickstarter campaign, crowdfund, online, and 8 months after I had started my research, the travel was funded. It even became a Kickstarter staff pick, the highest honor on the platform. I left my home on November 2nd, 2015, and for 6 weeks in 40 states, I did little else besides interview and drive. I met people in their homes, in coffee shops, cafes, community centers, anywhere that they would feel safe meeting a stranger who wanted to hear their stories. And these are people that I'd met through networking, a skill I developed as an entrepreneur. I met Betty Siegel, formerly of the Centers for Disease Control, who used to scheme to get into her boss's office in order to use the new word processor because it was so much better than a typewriter. 3 decades later, she loves the original Kindle because the reading screen doesn't hurt her sensitive eyes. But she wishes that her grandchildren would put down their smartphones when they come to visit. I sat with Father Jacques de Paul of the Benedictine Rite, who admitted to me that despite its distraction from God, his iPhone is the coolest thing he's ever owned. And there was Marge Darger, who, when her husband was dying, was able to bring the family together from abroad using video chat in order to sing to him during his last hours. The elders I met are amazed by the things we can accomplish with technology, but equally caution us to take time away from it in order to spend time with friends, family, and ourselves. One of the most interesting interviews I conducted was with Adele Jones of Michigan. Adele underscored this need for intentionality in this pivotal time in history. She told me that as her and her husband began adopting more technology into their lives, they grew further apart. They would be sitting in the living room, one on laptop, the other on mobile, physically sharing the same space, but mentally elsewhere. Adele wasn't the only elder concerned with how technology is affecting our relationships. Both Bob Johnson of Salt Lake City and John Booth of New Orleans told me stories about seeing young people eating in restaurants together while on their smartphones, physically together, but mentally apart. In fact, nearly every elder I interviewed told stories like this without prompt. Bob Johnson of Salt Lake City is a family psychologist, and he told me yet another story that really brought this concept home. He said a young man came to see him for counseling after he had broken off his engagement. He had done so via text message, and as a result, his fiancée had committed suicide. The personal touch that comes with in-person communication was not there to emotionally support her during the breakup. So what is happening to us? As I drove west, I stopped in Baraboo, Wisconsin to meet Dave Chickering. Dave was an evolutionary biologist who studied chimpanzees in the lab during his career. He told me he thought a lot about this issue and reminded me that our minds and societies have taken many generations to evolve. High tech has only taken decades. How do we cope in a world that receives 6,100 new apps a day? How do we affect ethics, mores, and etiquette for something so new and that changes so fast? Our elders are having a different take for managing technology. To us young people, new tech is new, exciting, cool, interesting. At the beginning of 2001, none of us knew we needed an iPod. But by the end of 2001, Steve Jobs had made his now famous speech, and we couldn't live without them. But the greatest generation has lived so long without high tech that they still stop to think, do I want this? Their decisions aren't based on cool factors, but whether or not a technology will supplement their lives or hinder them. For example, it's common to hear an elder say, I don't want to learn to text. But us young people are translating that to, I can't text, and assuming an entire generation is unable to use technology. Yet I sat with a masterful Facebook user with Dave Chickering. Dave has Facebook friends all over the world, strangers whom he travels to visit, something I wouldn't do. I found no evidence of race, creed, exposure, income level, or training that would dictate whether or not an elder would adopt technology into their lives. Remember Adele Jones of Michigan? As she and her husband noticed that they were growing further apart, they decided to do something about it. They now go on weekly dates outside of the house, leaving the technology behind. She's taken this one step further by having tea parties monthly with her friends. No technology allowed. I so loved this idea that when I returned from the 12,000 miles of research I conducted for my book, I too began hosting my own monthly brunches with my friends. It gave me the chance to see my friends and also gave those with anxiety and depression a safe place to socialize. When we cook together each month, our hands quickly fill with cooking implements and food, and the technology naturally falls to the wayside, with laughter, hugs, and communication ensuing. Ever since I started this work, my friends have said to me, I wish you could have interviewed my grandparents. I wish I could have interviewed my own. Sadly, we don't always know what we have until it's gone. 25% of the interviews I conducted have already passed away. Part of the reason that I wrote my book was so that other people could use the questions I formulated with their own family elders. It is a precious opportunity, especially for Generation Z, a generation that has grown up only knowing a world with high tech. Understanding how humans have lived for thousands of years is critical to making balanced decisions for technology within society. What if these nuggets of wisdom are exactly what we need in order to not go down a path of total human disengagement? Our elders don't hate tech. They're not Luddites, they don't eschew it. They simply ask that we pause and consider, how do I want to use this in my life? And that's what I want for you. Try putting your modem on a timer so you spend evenings internet-free with your family and loved ones. Maybe charge your phone in a different room at night so that you have smartphone-free evenings in bed. Maybe even leave your phone at home when you go out on a date or out to see friends. We can reclaim our use and control of technology, but it is up to us to choose it. Thank you.